In 1917, 3 shepherd children in Fatima, Portugal, claimed to have received a series of prophetic messages from the Virgin Mary, the last of which, known as the Third Secret, was said to be so shocking that the Vatican delayed its public disclosure for decades. When the Holy See finally released it in 2000, many believed that a crucial portion was missing. If the Third Secret had truly been fully revealed, why did those who read it firsthand insist that something had been omitted? And why did high-ranking figures within the Church suggest that its content would shake the faith of millions? The answer lies in the testimonies of those who had direct access to the original document, particularly Father Malachi Martin, a Jesuit scholar and former Vatican insider. He was among the select few who read the actual text under Pope John XXIII's authority. If you enjoy content that helps you grow spiritually, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and join our community for more inspiration. Let's get started. According to Martin, what was made public in 2000 was an incomplete version, one that deliberately excluded certain warnings about the Church's future and the forces that would seek to undermine it. The Vatican's official version spoke of a vision in which a bishop dressed in white, interpreted as the Pope, walked through a ruined city before being executed alongside clergy and laypeople. However, Martin and other scholars claimed that the real message contained much more. An apocalyptic revelation regarding the Church's internal corruption and a global crisis that would threaten the very foundation of faith. Those who challenged the official narrative pointed to a contradiction. Sister Lucia, the last surviving Fatima visionary, had always insisted that the Third Secret should be made public by 1960 because by then it would be clearer. Yet when 1960 arrived, the Vatican refused to release it. Instead, it was locked away, with Pope John XXIII reportedly saying that it did not concern his time. This decision only fueled speculation that its contents were too disturbing to disclose. Researchers such as Antonio Socci and Father Nicholas Gruner dedicated years to investigating whether the Vatican had concealed part of the message. Socci, initially skeptical of conspiracy theories, concluded that there was, in fact, an undisclosed document. Even Cardinal Ratzinger, before becoming Pope Benedict XVI, admitted in 1984 that the secret involved dangers to the faith and the life of the Christian. Father Malachi Martin was not just another priest. He was a man whose intellect and connections placed him at the very heart of the Vatican's most confidential affairs. Born in Ireland in 1920, he joined the Jesuit order and quickly gained recognition as a scholar of ancient biblical texts. Fluent in multiple languages and an expert in Semitic writings, his work led him to Rome, where he became an integral part of the Church's inner circle. All of us encounter moments when the truth seems elusive, and the world we thought we understood starts unraveling before our eyes. In times like these, gaining knowledge can be the key to making sense of it all. This is exactly what The Secret of Jesus' Apparitions offers, a path to clarity and wisdom through his revelations. This ebook goes into his prophecies and offers insight into what lies ahead. It's available for free in the pinned comment. Grab it now before the edition's gone. By the late 1950s, his reputation had earned him a position assisting Cardinal Augustin B., a key figure in the Second Vatican Council. Martin's role placed him in direct contact with Pope John XXIII and the discussions that would reshape the Church's direction. He was seen as a rising star within the hierarchy, a man expected to ascend into leadership. However, something shifted. By 1964, he had chosen a different path, one that would sever his ties with the Jesuits and lead him to a life of exile from the institution he once served. His decision to leave was not driven by personal scandal, but by an ideological disillusionment. According to Martin, the Church had begun prioritizing politics over faith, and many of its leaders were no longer focused on spiritual salvation. He claimed that power struggles had corrupted the Vatican, with high-ranking officials aligning themselves with globalist movements rather than defending Catholic doctrine. His sharpest criticisms were directed at the Jesuit order, which he accused of betraying its original mission. He spoke openly about how many of his fellow Jesuits had embraced Marxist ideologies, particularly in Latin America, where liberation theology had taken root. Martin viewed this shift as dangerous, believing it was part of a broader effort to transform the Church into a vehicle for political activism rather than a guardian of faith. Leaving the Jesuits meant losing everything: his status, his security, and his future within the Church. He moved to New York, where he lived humbly, working odd jobs while re-establishing himself as a writer. Over the years, his books would expose what he had witnessed in Rome, blending fact with fiction to circumvent restrictions on revealing classified information. Many of his works carried an unmistakable warning. Something dark was at work within the Vatican, and those in power were either blind to it or complicit in its rise. Despite the risks involved, he never fully detached himself from Vatican affairs. His reputation as a scholar and his deep knowledge of the Church's inner workings meant that he remained a sought-after voice on matters of doctrine and secrecy. It was during his time as an assistant to Cardinal Bay that he was granted access to one of the most controversial documents in Catholic history, the Third Secret of Fatima. In 1960, while travelling in a car with Pope John XXIII and Cardinal Bay, Martin was given the opportunity to read the document firsthand. Written on a single sheet of paper, it differed significantly from the 4-page version that the Vatican would later release in 2000. Fluent in Portuguese, he read the message directly, absorbing details that would haunt him for the rest of his life. Though bound by an oath not to reveal its exact contents, he found ways to hint at its gravity in subsequent years. One of the most chilling aspects of the secret, according to Martin, was its description of a potential crisis within the Church. He suggested that the message detailed an internal collapse, one that would lead to apostasy at the highest levels. His warnings were always carefully worded, designed to avoid direct accusations while still conveying urgency. On various occasions, he confirmed that the secret contained prophecies of catastrophic events, both spiritual and geopolitical, that would shake the foundation of faith itself. Father Malachi left behind knowledge that challenges everything we assume to be true. If you're ready to explore what has remained concealed for decades, don't wait. There are only a few copies left. Grab yours now through the pinned comment. In his later interviews, Martin spoke cryptically about the secret's implications. When asked whether it involved a widespread loss of belief, he acknowledged that it did. When pressed about whether it foretold an era in which the Church would be infiltrated by forces seeking to corrupt its teachings from within, he confirmed that this was also part of the message. He never explicitly stated who or what these forces were, but his writings made it clear that he believed they were already at work. His method of revealing information was indirect but effective. He would respond to specific questions with either confirmation or denial, never overstepping the boundaries of his oath. On at least one occasion, he acknowledged that the Third Secret described events so terrifying that they would shake even the most faithful Catholics. He hinted that this knowledge had affected Pope John XXIII, who, upon reading it, reportedly decided that humanity was not yet prepared to face such revelations. Malachi often spoke about the catastrophic events foretold in the Third Secret. describing them as inevitable unless drastic action was taken. Among the most alarming revelations was the prospect of a global war, one that would bring devastation on a scale never before witnessed. He suggested that entire nations would suffer, with destruction coming from both human conflict and natural disasters. The Church, he implied, would not be spared from this chaos, as internal divisions would leave it vulnerable at a time when unity was most needed. Beyond war and destruction, Martin hinted at something even more terrifying: the prophesied period known as the 3 Days of Darkness. This event, described in various Marian apparitions, was believed to be a divine intervention that would purge the world of evil. According to those who studied the messages of Fatima, this period would involve total darkness, during which only blessed candles would provide light. A great purification would take place, and those unprepared would not survive. Martin never directly confirmed that this was part of the third secret, but he frequently referenced it when discussing the consequences of the world's spiritual decline. Perhaps the most disturbing aspect of his revelations was the suggestion that the Church itself could fall under the control of malevolent forces. He alluded to a time when a pope, or at least someone in a position of supreme authority within the Vatican, would act in direct opposition to Catholic doctrine. This idea was so shocking that when a caller on the Art Bell radio show suggested that the third secret contained a prophecy about the final pope being under the influence of Satan, Martin did not refute it. Instead, he confirmed that this interpretation aligned with what he had read. The implications of such a claim were profound. A church leader compromised by darkness would mean that the faithful would be left without guidance at the very moment they needed it most. It would not be an external attack that brought ruin, but an erosion from within, an internal betrayal that would shatter the faith of millions. According to Martin, this was not a possibility confined to the distant future. It was already unfolding. He described it as a nightmare scenario in which the faithful would be tested beyond their limits, forced to navigate a reality where truth and deception were nearly indistinguishable. The further we go into the revelations of the third secret, the clearer it becomes that much has been kept from the world. If you want to connect the missing pieces and see the bigger picture, get your free ebook before it's too late. Copies are running out. Among the revelations that Malachi Martin emphasized, one of the most unsettling involved the role of Russia in the unfolding of Fatima's prophecies. He repeatedly suggested that the fate of the world hinged on Russia's actions, an assertion that aligned with the words of the Virgin Mary as reported by the visionaries in 1917. The third secret indicated that Russia was not merely a geopolitical entity, but a spiritual force that would either contribute to the salvation of humanity or its destruction. He described Russia as the regulator of the Fatima calendar, meaning that its influence over global affairs was pivotal in determining how the prophecies would unfold. While the Soviet Union had collapsed by the time Martin spoke publicly on these matters, he insisted that Russia's role was far from over. He referenced its historical ties to both Orthodox Christianity and militant atheism, suggesting that a dramatic spiritual transformation could emerge from within its borders. Some believed that this referred to Russia's eventual return to Christianity, while others interpreted it as a warning that Russia would become an instrument of divine chastisement if left unconverted. The fulfillment of Fatima's warnings is linked to a great crisis of faith that would engulf the world. He spoke of an age of apostasy, where the majority of Catholics, including high-ranking members of the clergy, would abandon core doctrines. This falling away from faith would not be immediate, but gradual, spreading like a silent plague through seminaries, universities, and even Vatican offices. By the time most realized what was happening, the damage would already be done. Spiritual decline had already begun decades earlier and was now accelerating. He pointed to changes in church teachings, the growing influence of secular ideologies, and the increasing number of clergy who no longer believed in fundamental Catholic truths. This loss of faith was not coincidental, but part of a larger agenda to weaken the church from within, making it more susceptible to external forces. The fight to keep the church alive wasn't just an idea. It was a real fight that was going on behind closed doors. There is an invisible war between forces seeking to preserve traditional Catholicism and those determined to reshape it into something unrecognizable. He claimed that within the Vatican itself, a group existed whose influence was so deeply entrenched that removing them by ordinary means was impossible. It's an immovable force, an internal presence that operated independently of the Church's visible structure. History is full of secrets, and some are too powerful to be ignored. If you want access to knowledge that few dare to explore, claim your free ebook now, while it's still available. Link in the pinned comment. Other clergy and theologians, including exorcist Father Gabriele Amorth, suggested that powerful factions within the Vatican had performed rituals of consecration to dark forces. Amorth stated that such acts were not just rumors, but likely a grim reality, indicating that corruption extended far beyond political maneuvering. Martin alluded to similar events, suggesting that the Vatican had become compromised in ways that most Catholics could not comprehend. In his books, often disguised as fiction, he painted a picture of a church infiltrated at the highest levels. He described ceremonies in which individuals swore loyalty not to Christ, but to secretive agendas designed to undermine the faith. That decisions affecting the future of Catholicism were no longer guided solely by divine inspiration, but were heavily influenced by external powers seeking to reshape global spirituality. If this message makes you think and you feel it connects with you, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Also, if you really want to support our work and help us keep creating valuable content, consider giving us a super thanks. Join this amazing community and don't miss any news. Despite these dark warnings, Martin believed that hope remained. He often referred to the role of the Virgin Mary, asserting that her intervention would be the decisive force in restoring the Church. The third secret of Fatima contained a warning, but also a solution, one that had been ignored for too long. If the Pope and the bishops consecrated Russia to the Immaculate Heart of Mary, as explicitly requested, the course of history could be altered. He held firm in his belief that this consecration had never been done properly, despite official claims to the contrary. He argued that partial or symbolic attempts were insufficient, and that only a formal, explicit act, naming Russia directly, would fulfill the conditions outlined in the Fatima prophecies. Until that happened, he warned, the crisis would escalate, the faith of millions would be tested, and the Church itself would continue its descent into an era of unprecedented turmoil.